The battlefield is silent for a moment, the air thick with tension, until a strange, almost otherworldly sound echoes across the field. Soldiers brace themselves, not knowing what to expect. This wasn't just any war, this was ancient warfare, a realm where the rules were rewritten daily, and the weapons were as mysterious as the minds that crafted them. From the unexpected to the downright bizarre, the ancients didn't just fight to win. They fought to astonish, to terrify, and to outthink their enemies in ways that still leave us in awe today. In this video, we're stepping into a world where flaming arrows lit up the skies, psychological warfare broke armies without a single blow, and weapons so peculiar they seem like they belong in myth were very much real. How did these unconventional tactics and mysterious tools shape the course of history, and what can they teach us about the ingenuity and sometimes desperation of the human spirit? Let's uncover the secrets of the ancients, where the line between brilliance and madness was often razor-thin. Long before the clash of steel and the roar of cannons, warfare was a test of wits as much as strength. In the cradle of civilization, where empires rose and fell like the tides, the battlefield was a canvas for innovation. Mesopotamia, often called the birthplace of organized warfare, saw the earliest forms of siege tactics and psychological manipulation. Here, armies didn't just rely on sheer numbers. They exploited the terrain, using rivers and mountains to their advantage, and even employed early forms of propaganda to demoralize their foes. But it wasn't just about outsmarting the enemy, it was about survival. In a world where resources were scarce and every battle could mean the difference between prosperity and ruin, creativity wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. Across the globe, in ancient China, the art of war took on a philosophical dimension. The legendary strategist Sun Tzu didn't just write about winning battles, he emphasized the importance of deception, surprise, and adaptability. His teachings, preserved in the art of war, reveal a deep understanding of human psychology and the unpredictable nature of conflict. Chinese armies developed ingenious weapons like the repeating crossbow, capable of raining down arrows with terrifying speed, and employed tactics that turned the environment into a weapon, such as flooding enemy camps or setting controlled fires to trap opposing forces. These early innovations weren't just about destruction, they were about reshaping the battlefield itself, bending it to the will of the victor. But what drove these civilizations to think outside the box? Geography played a pivotal role. Whether it was the arid deserts of Mesopotamia or the dense forests of China, the landscape dictated the rules of engagement. Limited resources forced leaders to think creatively, turning everyday objects into tools of war and exploiting the weaknesses of their adversaries. Culture, too, shaped the way wars were fought. In societies where honor and cunning were equally valued, the battlefield became a stage for both physical prowess and intellectual mastery. As these early strategies evolved, so did the tools of war. One of the most mysterious and devastating inventions of the ancient world was Greek fire, a weapon so potent it seemed almost supernatural. Used by the Byzantine Empire, this incendiary substance could burn on water and cling to anything it touched, creating a wall of flame that was nearly impossible to extinguish. Its exact composition remains a secret to this day, a testament to the lengths ancient civilizations would go to protect their most prized innovations. Greek fire wasn't just a weapon, it was a psychological tool, striking fear into the hearts of enemies and tipping the scales of power in ways that brute force alone never could. Picture this, a Byzantine warship cutting through the dark waters of the Mediterranean, its crew silent and focused. Then, without warning, a jet of liquid flame erupts from the ship's bow, arcing through the air like a dragon's breath. This was Greek fire, a weapon so terrifying it could turn the tide of an entire battle in moments. Unlike anything the world had seen before, this mysterious substance wasn't just fire. It was fire that clung to everything it touched, burning even on water. Imagine the shock of an enemy fleet as their ships were engulfed in flames that no amount of water could extinguish. Greek fire wasn't just a tool of destruction. It was a psychological weapon designed to paralyze foes with fear before the first arrow was even loosed. The origins of Greek fire are shrouded in mystery, much like the formula itself. Believed to have been developed in the 7th century by a Syrian engineer named Callinicus, it was a closely guarded secret of the Byzantine Empire. The exact ingredients remain unknown to this day, though historians speculate it may have included a mix of naphtha, quicklime, and other volatile compounds. What made it so effective was its ability to ignite on contact with water, a feature that made it devastating in naval warfare. Enemy ships once targeted had no escape. Their wooden hulls became kindling, their crews trapped in an inferno. The Byzantines used specialized siphons to project the flames, creating what could be described as an ancient flamethrower, a technology far ahead of its time. But Greek fire wasn't just about brute force, it was a weapon of strategy. In the hands of the Byzantine navy, it became a game changer, allowing smaller fleets to outmaneuver and overpower larger forces. The psychological impact was just as significant as the physical damage. The mere rumor of Greek fire could send enemy sailors into a panic, disrupting their formations and sapping their morale. It was a weapon that didn't just destroy ships, it broke spirits. And because the formula was such a closely held secret, its mystique only grew, becoming a symbol of Byzantine ingenuity and power. Yet, for all its destructive capabilities, Greek fire also highlights the fragility of ancient knowledge. When the Byzantine Empire fell, the secret of its creation was lost, leaving modern historians and chemists to piece together clues from ancient texts and archaeological findings. Some believe the formula may have been deliberately destroyed to prevent it from falling into enemy hands, while others suggest it was simply forgotten over time. Whatever the case, Greek fire stands as a testament to the lengths ancient civilizations would go to protect their most valuable innovations. This fiery weapon didn't just shape the battlefield, it reshaped the balance of power in the Mediterranean. For centuries, the Byzantine Empire held a strategic advantage, using Greek fire to repel invaders and secure their dominance at sea. It was a weapon born of desperation and ingenuity, a vivid reminder that in the ancient world, victory often went to those who could think beyond the sword and shield. But Greek fire wasn't the only incendiary weapon to leave its mark on history. From the flaming arrows of ancient China to the fire pots of medieval Europe, fire has long been a weapon of choice for those seeking to outthink and outlast their enemies. And speaking of fire arrows, let's turn our attention to another fiery innovation that lit up the skies of ancient warfare. The skies above ancient battlefields often burned with a terrifying light, not from the sun, but from the deadly arcs of fire arrows. These flaming projectiles, though simple in design, were a force to be reckoned with, striking fear into the hearts of enemies and turning the tide of countless battles. From the steppes of Central Asia to the rivers of ancient China, fire arrows were a weapon of choice for armies looking to combine destruction with psychological warfare. But what made these fiery projectiles so effective, and how did they become a staple of ancient combat? Crafting a fire arrow was a delicate art. The process began with a standard arrow, its tip wrapped in flammable material like oil-soaked cloth, resin, or even animal fat. Before launching, the arrowhead would be ignited, transforming it into a burning missile capable of setting structures, ships, or even entire camps ablaze. The challenge, however, was in the execution. Fire arrows required precise timing and skill to ensure they reached their target before the flame burned out or the arrow's flight was disrupted by wind. In the hands of a skilled archer, though they were devastating, the psychological impact of fire arrows cannot be overstated. Imagine standing in a besieged fortress, watching as a rain of fire descends from the sky. The sight alone was enough to sow panic, as the flames threatened not only to destroy but to spread uncontrollably. In naval battles, fire arrows were particularly effective. Wooden ships coated in tar and packed with flammable materials were highly vulnerable. A single well-placed fire arrow could ignite an enemy vessel, turning it into a floating inferno and crippling an entire fleet. The chaos and confusion caused by these attacks often gave the aggressors a decisive advantage. But fire arrows weren't without their challenges. Unpredictable winds could send them off course, endangering the archers who launched them or even their own troops. Friendly fire was a constant risk, especially in dense formations or chaotic battles. And then there was the issue of timing. If the arrow's flame burned out too quickly, it would fail to ignite its target. If it burned too slowly, it could endanger the archer holding the bow. These limitations meant that fire arrows were often used strategically, reserved for moments when their impact would be most felt. Despite these challenges, fire arrows played a crucial role in ancient warfare. During sieges, they were used to set fire to enemy fortifications, weakening defenses and creating openings for assault. In naval warfare, they became a game changer, allowing smaller fleets to take on larger, more heavily armed ships. And on open battlefields, they served as both a weapon and a signal, their fiery trails coordinating troops and marking targets. The fire arrow was more than just a tool of destruction. It was a symbol of ingenuity, a testament to the creativity and resourcefulness of ancient warriors. As we move from the skies lit by fire arrows to the ground, we'll explore another unconventional tactic that shaped ancient warfare: the use of animals. From war elephants charging across battlefields to messenger pigeons delivering critical information, animals played a surprising and often overlooked role in the strategies of the ancients. Their contributions remind us that in the chaos of war, even the smallest or largest allies could make all the difference. The battlefield rumbled not just with the clash of swords and shields, but with the thunderous footsteps of creatures that seemed to belong more to myth than reality: war elephants. These colossal beasts, towering over soldiers and horses alike, were the ancient world's equivalent of tanks, a living, breathing force of destruction. Picture the scene: an enemy army, tightly packed and confident in their formation, suddenly confronted by a line of elephants charging at full speed, their tusks gleaming and their massive bodies shaking the ground beneath them. The psychological impact alone was enough to send even the bravest warriors fleeing in terror. But what made these giants of the animal kingdom so effective on the battlefield, and how did ancient armies harness their raw power? Training a war elephant was no small feat. These animals, often captured from the wild or bred specifically for combat, required years of preparation to become reliable assets in battle. Handlers, known as mahouts, formed close bonds with their elephants, guiding them through rigorous drills to ensure they could follow commands even in the chaos of war. The elephants themselves were outfitted with heavy armor, sometimes reinforced with metal plates, and their tusks were often fitted with sharp iron tips or blades. Some armies even mounted archers or spearmen on the elephants' backs, turning them into mobile platforms for ranged attacks. But the true strength of war elephants lay not in their armor or weaponry, but in their sheer size and the fear they inspired. When deployed, war elephants were used to break enemy lines, trampling soldiers and scattering formations with ease. Their presence could turn the tide of a battle in moments, as opposing forces struggled to regroup under the relentless assault. The noise alone was enough to unnerve troops. Imagine the deep, resonant trumpeting of elephants combined with the screams of men and the clash of weapons. For armies facing war elephants for the first time, the experience was nothing short of horrifying. Soldiers who had never seen such a sight often broke ranks and fled, their discipline shattered by the overwhelming spectacle. But war elephants weren't invincible. Despite their imposing size, these animals had vulnerabilities that savvy commanders could exploit. Elephants are highly intelligent and sensitive creatures, prone to panic when injured or surrounded. Ancient armies developed counter-tactics specifically designed to turn the elephant's strength against them. One common strategy was to target the mahouts, the handlers who controlled the elephants. Without their guidance, the animals could become confused and turn on their own forces. Another tactic involved using loud noises, such as drums or horns, to startle the elephants and drive them into a frenzy. Some armies even deployed pigs, coating them in oil and setting them alight to create a chaotic, flaming distraction that would terrify the elephants. The use of war elephants also came with logistical challenges. These massive animals required enormous amounts of food and water, making them difficult to sustain during long campaigns. Transporting them across vast distances was another hurdle, especially when navigating rough terrain or crossing rivers. Despite these limitations, war elephants remained a formidable presence on the battlefield for centuries, their legacy enduring in the annals of military history. The creativity of ancient commanders in utilizing war elephants speaks to their ability to think beyond conventional tactics. These animals weren't just weapons, they were symbols of power and ingenuity, a testament to the lengths humans would go to gain an edge in war. But elephants weren't the only animals to play a role in ancient warfare. From the skies, another creature buzzed into the fray, proving that even the smallest of allies could have a sting far greater than their size. Now let's explore the surprising and often overlooked use of bees as weapons in ancient battles. In the chaos of ancient warfare, where armies sought every possible advantage, one of the most unexpected weapons came not from the forge or the workshop, but from nature itself, bees. These tiny, buzzing creatures, often overlooked in their peaceful role as pollinators, became instruments of chaos and pain on the battlefield. Imagine the scene: a tightly packed enemy formation suddenly bombarded with beehives, their fragile containers shattering on impact. Within moments, the air would fill with the angry hum of thousands of bees, their stings delivering not just pain but panic. This wasn't just a weapon of convenience, it was a calculated tactic designed to exploit the natural instincts of both bees and humans. For ancient warriors, turning to nature for solutions wasn't just creative, it was survival. The use of bees as weapons required a deep understanding of their behavior. Armies would often collect wild hives or cultivate them specifically for battle, carefully transporting them to the front lines. When the time came, soldiers would hurl these hives at enemy troops, either by hand or using slings and catapults. The impact would break the hive, releasing a swarm of angry bees. The results were immediate and devastating. Soldiers, caught off guard and unable to defend themselves, would scatter in disarray, their formations collapsing under the relentless assault. The stings themselves were painful, but the psychological impact was even greater. The sight of a buzzing cloud descending upon them was enough to break the morale of even the most disciplined troops. Bees weren't just effective because of their stings, they were unpredictable and difficult to counter. Unlike conventional weapons, which could be blocked or deflected, a swarm of bees was impossible to control once released. They didn't discriminate between friend and foe, adding an element of chaos that could disrupt both sides of the battle. This unpredictability made them a double-edged sword, but for armies willing to take the risk, the rewards were immense. A well-placed hive could turn the tide of a skirmish, creating openings for a decisive charge or forcing an enemy retreat. The cultural significance of bees in ancient societies added another layer to their use as weapons. In many cultures, bees were revered as symbols of order, diligence, and even divine power. The Egyptians associated them with the sun god Ra, while the Greeks saw them as messengers of the gods. By harnessing bees in battle, ancient warriors weren't just exploiting a natural resource, they were tapping into a powerful symbol, one that carried both practical and spiritual weight. The use of bees as weapons blurred the line between the natural and the supernatural, turning them into agents of both destruction and divine will. But what made bees such a uniquely effective weapon? Beyond their physical impact, they played on the deep-seated fear of the unknown. Unlike swords or arrows, which could be seen and understood, a swarm of bees was an uncontrollable force, a living weapon that seemed to act with a mind of its own. This psychological dimension made them particularly valuable in sieges and ambushes, where surprise and fear were key to success. The chaos they created wasn't just physical, it was mental, breaking down the cohesion and resolve of enemy forces. The ingenuity of using bees as weapons speaks to the resourcefulness of ancient armies. In a world where every advantage counted, even the smallest creatures could become tools of war. Yet, this tactic also highlights the delicate balance between humanity and nature. Bees, so vital to the ecosystem, were weaponized in ways that remind us of the lengths to which ancient civilizations would go to secure victory. Their use on the battlefield is a testament to the creativity and adaptability of ancient warriors who saw potential in the most unlikely of places. As we move from the buzzing chaos of bee warfare, we'll shift our focus to another powerful tool in the ancient arsenal: the art of psychological warfare. From terrifying war cries to elaborate deceptions, the ancients understood that the mind could be as much a battlefield as the physical terrain. How did they use fear, confusion, and misinformation to gain the upper hand? Let's uncover the strategies that turned psychological manipulation into a weapon as deadly as any blade. The battlefield wasn't just a place of physical confrontation. It was a theater of the mind where fear and uncertainty could be as deadly as any blade. Ancient commanders knew this all too well. They understood that breaking an enemy's spirit could be just as effective as breaking their ranks. Psychological warfare, the art of manipulating emotions to gain an advantage, was a cornerstone of ancient military strategy. From bone-chilling war cries to eerie music that echoed across the plains, the ancients weaponized fear in ways that still send shivers down our spines today. But how did they turn something as intangible as fear into a decisive tool of war? Let's step into the shadows of ancient warfare and uncover the chilling tactics that made the mind itself a battlefield. One of the most primal tools of psychological warfare was the war cry. Far more than a simple shout, these guttural roars were designed to strike terror into the hearts of enemies before the first blow was even struck. Imagine standing in a tightly packed formation, shields raised, swords at the ready, when suddenly a deafening roar erupts from the opposing army. The sound alone could rattle even the most disciplined soldiers, disrupting their focus and sowing doubt. The Spartans, for example, were famous for their intimidating war cry, a collective bellow that echoed across the battlefield like the growl of a beast. It wasn't just noise, it was a calculated move to unnerve their foes, making them hesitate just long enough for the Spartans to strike. But war cries were only the beginning. Ancient warriors took psychological manipulation to another level with eerie music and haunting instruments. The Celts, for instance, used carnyxes, long, trumpet-like instruments adorned with animal heads, to create otherworldly sounds that pierced the air like the wail of a banshee. The sight of these instruments, combined with their unsettling tones, was enough to unsettle even the bravest troops. Music became a weapon, not just to inspire one's own army, but to disorient and frighten the enemy. It was a symphony of fear played out on the grand stage of war. Masks and costumes added another layer to this psychological arsenal. Warriors from various cultures donned terrifying visages, transforming themselves into living nightmares. The Aztecs, for example, wore masks depicting fearsome gods and mythical creatures, turning their warriors into avatars of divine wrath. The psychological impact was profound. Facing an enemy who appeared more demon than human could shake the resolve of even the most seasoned fighters. These masks weren't just for show. They were tools of terror designed to make the enemy question whether they were fighting mortals or monsters. Demoralization was another key goal of psychological warfare. Ancient commanders excelled at exploiting their enemies' weaknesses, using tactics that eroded morale and sowed discord. During sieges, for instance, attackers would sometimes catapult the heads of fallen enemies into a besieged city, a grim reminder of the fate that awaited its defenders. The Romans were masters of this brutal strategy, using it to break the will of those holding out against them. Fear, hunger, and despair became weapons in their own right, turning the tide of a siege without the need for a costly assault. Deception also played a crucial role. The ancient Chinese strategist Sun Tzu famously said, "All warfare is based on deception." Armies would often create the illusion of greater numbers by lighting extra campfires or marching in circles to make their forces appear larger. False retreats were another common tactic, luring overconfident enemies into traps where they could be ambushed. These tricks preyed on the enemy's assumptions and fears, turning their own confidence against them. Psychological warfare wasn't just about brute force, it was about outthinking the opponent, bending their perceptions to your will. The power of fear, when wielded skillfully, could disrupt even the most well-laid strategies. Troops unnerved by strange sounds, terrifying masks, or clever deceptions were more likely to make mistakes, break formation, or flee altogether. The psychological toll could be just as devastating as physical casualties, leaving armies weakened and vulnerable long before the battle was truly joined. For ancient commanders, mastering the art of fear wasn't just a tactic, it was a necessity, a way to tip the scales in their favor without relying solely on strength of arms. As we move from the chilling realm of psychological warfare, we'll shift our focus to the machines that reshaped the ancient battlefield. Siege engines, towering constructs of wood and metal, were the ancient world's equivalent of heavy artillery. From catapults that hurled massive stones to battering rams that could shatter city gates, these ingenious inventions turned the tide of countless wars. But how did these monumental machines come to be, and what role did they play in the grand strategy of ancient warfare? Let's explore the engineering marvels that brought walls tumbling down and empires to their knees. The roar of battle fades momentarily as the focus shifts to the slow, deliberate advance of siege engines, massive, lumbering machines designed to bring even the mightiest walls crashing down. These were not just tools of war, they were feats of engineering brilliance, born from the minds of ancient innovators who understood that brute force alone could not conquer a fortified city. From battering rams that pounded gates into splinters to catapults that launched stones with terrifying precision, siege engines reshaped the ancient battlefield, turning the tide of wars and redefining what it meant to lay siege to a city. But how did these colossal machines come to be, and what made them so effective? Let's step into the world of ancient siege warfare, where ingenuity met determination to break the unbreakable. At the heart of any siege was the battering ram, a deceptively simple yet devastating weapon. Picture a massive log, often reinforced with iron or bronze, suspended within a protective frame. Soldiers would swing the ram back and forth, its momentum building with each strike until it collided with a gate or wall with bone-shaking force. The battering ram wasn't just about raw power, it was about persistence. Hour after hour, day after day, the relentless pounding would wear down even the sturdiest defenses, creating cracks that could be exploited. but battering rams weren't without their challenges. Defenders would rain down arrows, boiling oil, or even fire in an attempt to destroy the ram or its operators. To counter this, engineers designed protective coverings, often made of wood and animal hides, to shield the soldiers and the ram itself. This constant back and forth between attacker and defender drove innovations that made siege warfare a battle of wits as much as strength. Then there were the catapults, the artillery of the ancient world. These machines, capable of hurling massive stones or flaming projectiles over great distances, were as much about precision as they were about destruction. The most famous of these was the ballista, a giant crossbow-like device that launched arrows or bolts with enough force to pierce armor or even wooden walls. But it was the onager, a type of catapult that used torsion power, that truly showcased the ingenuity of ancient engineers. By twisting ropes or sinews to store energy, the onager could fling heavy stones with incredible accuracy, smashing through fortifications or scattering enemy troops. The sound of a catapult's release, a deep, resonant thud, was often enough to send defenders scrambling for cover, knowing that destruction was mere moments away. Building these machines was no small feat. Siege engines required skilled craftsmen, vast amounts of materials, and meticulous planning. Wood had to be cut, shaped, and reinforced, metal components forged and fitted, and ropes or sinews carefully tensioned to ensure maximum power. Transporting these behemoths to the battlefield was another challenge entirely. Siege engines were often disassembled and carried in pieces, then reassembled on site, a process that required not only engineering expertise but also logistical coordination. Armies had to account for the terrain, the availability of resources, and the time it took to construct the machines, all while under the constant threat of enemy raids or counterattacks. The psychological impact of siege engines cannot be overstated. For defenders, the sight of a battering ram approaching or the distant groan of a catapult being loaded was a grim reminder of the relentless nature of siege warfare. Each strike, each projectile, chipped away not only at the walls but at the morale of those inside. For attackers, the siege engines represented hope, a tangible way to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. They were symbols of determination, ingenuity, and the unyielding drive to achieve victory, no matter the cost. But perhaps what's most remarkable about these machines is how they reflect the resourcefulness of ancient civilizations. Siege engines were not just weapons, they were solutions to complex problems, born from the need to adapt and overcome. They remind us that the ancient world was not one of stagnation but of constant innovation, where every challenge spurred new ideas and every failure led to greater successes. The siege engines of antiquity were more than tools of war. They were monuments to human creativity, standing as a testament to what we can achieve when we combine knowledge, skill, and determination. As we leave the world of siege engines behind, we turn our attention to another marvel of ancient warfare, the Hittite chariots. These swift, deadly vehicles revolutionized battlefield tactics, bringing speed and precision to a world dominated by foot soldiers. But what made the Hittite chariots so effective, and how did they shape the course of ancient warfare? The answers lie in the deserts and plains of the ancient Near East, where innovation once again changed the face of conflict. The battlefield was alive with the sound of hooves and wheels, a thunderous rhythm that signaled the arrival of one of the ancient world's most formidable weapons, the Hittite chariot. Sleek, swift, and deadly, these vehicles transformed the way wars were fought, bringing a level of speed and precision that left slower, heavier armies struggling to keep up. The Hittites, masters of innovation, didn't just ride into battle, they raced into it, turning their chariots into extensions of their will. But what made these chariots so revolutionary, and how did they give the Hittites an edge that reshaped the balance of power in the ancient Near East? Let's take a closer look at the design, strategy, and legacy of these iconic war machines. At the heart of the Hittite chariot's success was its lightweight construction. Unlike the bulky, cumbersome chariots used by earlier civilizations, the Hittite version was designed for speed and agility. Built with a sturdy wooden frame and reinforced with bronze or iron fittings, these chariots were pulled by 2 horses, allowing them to maneuver quickly across the battlefield. The wheels, often spoked rather than solid, reduced weight and increased mobility, making them ideal for the rough, uneven terrain of the ancient world. But what truly set the Hittite chariot apart was its crew. Each chariot carried 3 warriors, a driver to steer, a shield bearer to protect, and an archer or spearman to attack. This trio worked in perfect harmony, turning the chariot into a mobile platform for both offense and defense. The Hittite chariot wasn't just a means of transportation, it was a weapon in its own right. In battle, these vehicles were used to outflank enemy formations, striking with lightning speed before retreating to safety. Imagine the chaos as a line of chariots thundered toward an unprepared army, their archers raining down arrows while the shield bearers deflected incoming attacks. The psychological impact was immense. Troops facing chariots for the first time often panicked, their formations breaking under the relentless assault. The Hittites exploited this fear, using their chariots not just to kill but to demoralize, turning the tide of battle before it had even begun. But the Hittite chariot's dominance wasn't just about speed and firepower, it was also about strategy. The Hittites understood the importance of terrain, using their chariots to control key positions and disrupt enemy movements. In open plains, they could unleash their full potential, sweeping across the battlefield with devastating effect. In more confined spaces, they adapted, using their agility to outmaneuver slower foes. This flexibility made the Hittite chariot a versatile tool, capable of adapting to the challenges of any battlefield. It was a weapon of both brute force and finesse, a testament to the ingenuity of its creators. Yet, like all great innovations, the reign of the chariot was not eternal. As armies evolved, so too did their tactics and tools. The rise of cavalry-mounted soldiers who could move swiftly without the need for cumbersome chariots marked the beginning of the end for these iconic vehicles. Cavalry offered greater flexibility and endurance, allowing armies to cover vast distances without the logistical challenges of transporting and maintaining chariots. By the first millennium BC, chariots had largely faded from the battlefield, their role reduced to ceremonial use or elite transportation. The Hittite chariot, once a symbol of military prowess, became a relic of a bygone era. Still, the legacy of the Hittite chariot endures. It stands as a reminder of how innovation can reshape the battlefield, introducing new possibilities and forcing old strategies to adapt or perish. The Hittites didn't just build chariots, they redefined warfare, proving that speed and precision could be as deadly as brute strength. Their chariots were more than just machines. They were the embodiment of a culture that valued ingenuity, adaptability, and the relentless pursuit of victory. As we leave the world of chariots behind, we'll explore another dark and deadly aspect of ancient warfare, the use of poison. From venom-tipped arrows to tainted water supplies, poison became a weapon of stealth and subterfuge, striking fear into the hearts of enemies without the need for direct confrontation. How did ancient armies harness the power of poison, and what made it such a feared tool in the art of war? Let's uncover the secrets of this silent killer and its role in shaping the course of history. In the shadowy corners of ancient warfare, where honor often gave way to necessity, poison emerged as a silent yet devastating weapon. Unlike the clash of swords or the roar of siege engines, poison worked in the background, striking unseen and leaving chaos in its wake. From venom-tipped arrows to tainted water supplies, this lethal tool became a favorite of those who valued cunning over brute force. But what made poison such a feared and effective weapon? and how did its use challenge the very notions of honorable combat? Let's step into the murky world of ancient toxins and uncover how this deadly art reshaped the battlefield. The application of poison to weapons was as varied as it was ingenious. Archers, for instance, would coat their arrowheads with venom extracted from snakes, scorpions, or even poisonous plants. A single scratch from one of these tipped arrows could spell doom for an enemy, as the toxin coursed through their body, paralyzing or killing them within hours. Spears and daggers were similarly treated, turning even the smallest wound into a fatal one. The psychological impact was profound. Imagine the terror of facing an enemy whose weapons didn't just wound, they killed slowly and painfully with no hope of survival. Poisoned weapons weren't just tools of death, they were instruments of fear designed to break morale as much as bodies, but poison wasn't limited to handheld weapons. Ancient armies also used it to contaminate water supplies, a tactic that could cripple entire cities or armies without a single clash of steel. Defenders under siege, desperate and confined, would find their wells and rivers tainted, forcing them to choose between dehydration or drinking poison. This method of warfare was particularly devastating because it targeted everyone, soldiers and civilians alike. It was a grim reminder that in the chaos of war, no one was truly safe, not even those far from the front lines. The ethical implications of poison use were hotly debated even in ancient times. Many cultures viewed poison as a dishonorable weapon, a cowardly tool that bypassed the bravery and skill of direct combat. The Greeks and Romans, for example, often condemned its use, associating it with treachery and deceit. Yet, despite these moral objections, poison remained a staple in the arsenals of many civilizations. For those who wielded it, victory often outweighed principles. After all, in the brutal calculus of war, survival was the ultimate goal, and poison offered a way to achieve it without risking one's own soldiers. One of the most infamous uses of poison in ancient warfare came from the Scythians, a nomadic people known for their mastery of archery. They would dip their arrows in a concoction of snake venom and decaying animal carcasses, creating a lethal mix that caused excruciating pain and rapid death. Even a glancing hit could incapacitate an enemy, making the Scythians a formidable force on the battlefield. Their reliance on poison wasn't just about killing, it was about instilling terror. An army that knew it was facing poisoned arrows was far more likely to hesitate, falter, or even retreat. The effectiveness of poison lay not just in its lethality, but in its unpredictability. Unlike a sword or spear, which could be blocked or dodged, poison worked invisibly, often hours or even days after the initial strike. This delayed effect made it a weapon of psychological warfare as much as physical destruction. Enemies would grow paranoid, unsure of who or what might be carrying the deadly substance. The mere rumor of poison could sow discord and mistrust within an army, weakening it from within long before any battle began. Yet for all its advantages, poison was not without risks. Handling toxic substances required skill and caution, as a single mistake could turn the weapon against its user. Armies had to carefully train their soldiers in the safe preparation and application of poisons, a process that added another layer of complexity to warfare. And then there was the question of supply. Poisoning an entire water source, for example, required large quantities of toxins which weren't always easy to obtain. These logistical challenges meant that poison was often reserved for specific, high-stakes situations rather than everyday combat. The use of poison in ancient warfare forces us to confront the darker side of human ingenuity. It reminds us that the drive to survive and conquer can lead to methods that defy our ideals of honor and fairness. Poisoned weapons were a stark departure from the glory of open battle, yet they were undeniably effective. They symbolized the lengths to which ancient civilizations would go to secure victory, even if it meant embracing tactics that blurred the line between right and wrong. As we leave the shadowy realm of poison behind, we'll turn our attention to another layer of ancient warfare, the art of deception. From elaborate ruses to false retreats, ancient commanders understood that the mind could be as much a battlefield as the physical terrain. How did they use trickery and misdirection to outmaneuver their enemies? The answers lie in the cunning strategies that turned lies into weapons and illusions into victories. The battlefield was not always a place of straightforward clashes and brute force. It was also a stage for cunning, where the sharpest minds could turn the tide of war with a well-executed lie. Ancient commanders understood that deception could be as deadly as any sword or spear. By outsmarting their enemies, they could achieve victories that seemed impossible through sheer strength alone. From fake retreats to elaborate ruses, trickery became a cornerstone of ancient warfare, proving that sometimes the best weapon was a clever mind. But how did these deceptive tactics work, and what made them so effective? Let's step into the world of ancient trickery and uncover the secrets of outsmarting the enemy. One of the most classic examples of battlefield deception was the fake retreat. This tactic involved luring an enemy into a false sense of security by pretending to flee, only to turn the tables at the last moment. Picture this: an army appears to break ranks, scattering in apparent panic. The enemy, sensing victory, charges forward in pursuit only to find themselves walking straight into a trap. Suddenly, the retreating forces regroup, reinforced by hidden troops lying in wait. The result: chaos and confusion, as the overconfident enemy finds themselves surrounded and outmaneuvered. The Mongols were masters of this strategy, using their unparalleled mobility to feign retreats and draw opponents into deadly ambushes. It was a risky move, requiring precise timing and discipline, but when executed correctly, it could turn a losing battle into a stunning victory. False signals were another powerful tool in the ancient commander's arsenal. By manipulating communication, armies could mislead their enemies or sow discord within their ranks. Take, for example, the use of smoke signals or flags to send misleading orders. An ancient general might order his troops to raise a flag signaling a retreat, causing the enemy to lower their guard or abandon their position. Alternatively, false distress signals could lure enemy reinforcements away from key areas, leaving them vulnerable to attack. The psychological impact of such tricks was immense. Imagine the frustration of realizing that the carefully observed signals were nothing but a ruse designed to lead you astray. In the chaos of battle, where split-second decisions could mean life or death, deception like this could be utterly devastating. Disguises and camouflage also played a significant role in ancient trickery. Armies would often dress in the uniforms of their enemies or use natural materials to blend into their surroundings. The Trojan horse is perhaps the most iconic example of this tactic, a massive wooden structure, seemingly a peace offering, hiding a deadly secret within. The unsuspecting Trojans brought the horse inside their city walls, only to be ambushed by Greek soldiers hidden inside. It was a stroke of brilliance that turned the tide of the Trojan War, proving that sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones you couldn't see. But disguises weren't limited to grand schemes like the Trojan horse. On a smaller scale, scouts and spies would infiltrate enemy camps, gathering intelligence or spreading misinformation while dressed as locals or even enemy soldiers. These covert operations could disrupt supply lines, spread false rumors, or even assassinate key leaders, all while remaining undetected. The Romans, too, were no strangers to deception. One of their most famous formations, the testudo or tortoise, was as much a psychological weapon as it was a defensive tactic. By locking their shields together to create an impenetrable shell, Roman soldiers could advance under a hail of arrows, their formation resembling a slow-moving, unstoppable force. The sight of this seemingly invincible wall of shields could demoralize opponents, creating a sense of helplessness even before the first blow was struck. The testudo wasn't just about protection, it was about projecting an image of invincibility, a deception that played on the enemy's fears and doubts. But deception wasn't just about grand gestures or elaborate schemes. Sometimes the simplest tricks were the most effective. During the Second Punic War, the Carthaginian general Hannibal famously used flaming oxen to deceive the Roman army. By tying torches to the horns of cattle and driving them toward the enemy at night, Hannibal created the illusion of a massive army on the move. The Romans, believing they were about to be overrun, abandoned their fortified positions, only to find themselves ambushed by Hannibal's actual forces. It was a masterstroke of misdirection, proving that even the smallest deception could have monumental consequences. The impact of these tactics went far beyond the battlefield. Deception reshaped the way wars were fought, forcing commanders to think not just about strength and numbers, but about psychology and strategy. It was a reminder that warfare was as much a mental game as a physical one, where the ability to outthink your opponent could be the key to victory. These ancient tricks were more than just clever ideas. They were a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of the human mind, capable of turning even the most dire situations to its advantage. As we leave the world of deception behind, we'll shift our focus to another iconic formation, the Roman testudo. This ingenious strategy wasn't just a defensive maneuver, it was a symbol of discipline, coordination, and the relentless drive to overcome any obstacle. How did this formation work, and why did it become such a defining feature of Roman warfare? The answers lie in the shields, the soldiers, and the unyielding determination that made Rome a superpower of the ancient world. The Roman testudo, or tortoise, was more than just a defensive formation. It was a masterpiece of military engineering and a testament to the discipline that made Rome's legions nearly unstoppable. Picture this, a tightly packed group of soldiers, their rectangular shields held overhead and interlocked like the scales of a tortoise's shell, with others holding their shields in front to form an unbroken wall. From every angle, the testudo was a fortress on the move, a living, breathing shield that could withstand a barrage of arrows, stones, or even boiling oil. But how did this ingenious tactic work, and why did it become such a defining feature of Roman warfare? At its core, the testudo was about unity. Each soldier had to move in perfect coordination with their comrades, their shields overlapping just enough to leave no gaps. The formation required not only physical strength. Holding a heavy shield overhead for extended periods was no small feat, but also unwavering trust in the soldiers around you. One misstep, one shield out of place, and the entire formation could crumble, leaving the group vulnerable. This level of precision and teamwork was a hallmark of Roman military training, where discipline and order were drilled into every legionary from the moment they joined the ranks. The testudo's effectiveness lay in its versatility. Whether advancing toward a fortified wall or crossing an open battlefield under a hail of projectiles, the formation provided unparalleled protection. Arrows and stones would bounce harmlessly off the shields, while the tightly packed ranks made it nearly impossible for enemies to break through. For defenders on city walls, the sight of an advancing testudo was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Here was a force that seemed impervious to their best efforts, a slow but unstoppable tide that could breach even the strongest defenses. But the testudo wasn't without its flaws. While it excelled in defensive situations, it was less effective in open combat, where speed and mobility were key. The formation's rigid structure made it difficult to maneuver quickly, leaving it vulnerable to flanking attacks or charges from cavalry. Additionally, the weight of the shields and the physical strain of maintaining the formation for long periods could exhaust even the most seasoned soldiers. And if the testudo was broken, whether by a well-placed boulder or a coordinated assault, the tightly packed soldiers inside became easy targets for the enemy. Despite these limitations, the testudo played a crucial role in Rome's military success. It was a symbol of the empire's ingenuity and adaptability, a tactic that turned the humble shield into a weapon of both defense and psychological warfare. The sight of an advancing testudo was a reminder of Rome's relentless determination, a force that could withstand anything the enemy threw at it. It wasn't just a formation, it was a statement, a declaration that Rome's legions were unbreakable, united, and unstoppable. As we move from the disciplined ranks of the testudo, we'll turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of ancient warfare: the use of smoke and mirrors, not in the metaphorical sense, but as literal tools of deception and strategy. How did ancient armies use smoke to obscure their movements or mirrors to blind and confuse their enemies? The answers lie in the clever, often overlooked tactics that turn the battlefield into a stage for illusion and misdirection. The battlefield was not just a place of steel and blood. It was also a stage for illusion where smoke and mirrors could turn the tide of war. Ancient commanders understood that confusion could be as powerful as any blade, and they wielded these tools with a cunning that still leaves us in awe today. From dense smoke screens that cloaked movements to reflective surfaces that blinded and bewildered, these tactics were a testament to the ingenuity of ancient warfare. But how exactly did these strategies work, and what made them so effective? Let's step into the haze of ancient combat and uncover the secrets of smoke and mirrors. Smoke screens were one of the most versatile tools in the ancient arsenal. By burning damp wood, wet straw, or even toxic materials, armies could create thick clouds of smoke that obscured their movements and disoriented their enemies. Picture this: a battlefield shrouded in a choking fog, visibility reduced to mere feet. Soldiers, unable to see their foes or even their own comrades, would stumble in confusion, their formations breaking under the weight of uncertainty. The psychological impact was profound. Fear of the unknown, of what might be lurking in the smoke, could paralyze even the most disciplined troops. It was a tactic that played on the mind as much as the body, turning the battlefield into a chaotic, disorienting nightmare. But smoke wasn't just a defensive tool. It could also be used offensively to mask advances or retreats. The Chinese, for example, were masters of this strategy, using smoke to conceal their movements during sieges or ambushes. By creating a smoke screen, they could approach enemy positions undetected, launching surprise attacks that caught their foes completely off guard. Similarly, retreating armies would use smoke to cover their withdrawal, leaving their enemies unsure of whether to pursue or hold their ground. In the chaos of war, where every second counted, smoke became a tool of misdirection, a way to control the flow of battle without ever drawing a sword. Mirrors, on the other hand, brought a different kind of chaos to the battlefield. The reflective surfaces of polished bronze or silver could be used to blind and disorient enemies, especially in the bright sunlight of arid regions. Imagine standing in formation, shields raised, when suddenly a blinding flash of light strikes your eyes. The glare would be overwhelming, forcing soldiers to avert their gaze and breaking their focus at a critical moment. This tactic was particularly effective against archers, whose aim depended on clear vision. By disrupting their line of sight, mirrors could render entire units ineffective, giving the attackers a crucial advantage. One of the most famous and debated uses of mirrors in ancient warfare comes from the legendary Archimedes. During the Roman siege of Syracuse, it's said that the brilliant inventor used large reflective surfaces to focus sunlight onto Roman ships, setting them ablaze. While historians still debate the feasibility of this death ray, the story highlights the potential of mirrors as weapons of war. Whether or not Archimedes' mirrors truly existed, the idea itself speaks to the creativity of ancient minds, always searching for new ways to outwit their enemies. Yet, for all their brilliance, these tactics were not without challenges. Smoke screens, while effective, were difficult to control. A sudden shift in the wind could blow the smoke back onto the user, turning a clever strategy into a dangerous liability. Mirrors, too, had their limitations. They were only effective in bright sunlight, and their reflective surfaces required constant polishing to maintain their effectiveness. Additionally, both tactics relied heavily on timing and coordination. A poorly executed smoke screen or a mistimed flash of light could do more harm than good, leaving the attackers exposed and vulnerable. Despite these challenges, smoke and mirrors remained powerful tools in the ancient commander's arsenal. They were a reminder that warfare was as much about psychology as it was about physical strength. By exploiting the senses and playing on the fears of their enemies, ancient armies could achieve victories that seemed impossible through brute force alone. These tactics were a testament to the creativity and adaptability of the human mind, proving that sometimes the most effective weapons were the ones that confused and disoriented rather than destroyed. As we leave the haze of smoke and the glare of mirrors behind, we turn our attention to another legendary weapon, Archimedes' death ray. This mysterious device, said to harness the power of the sun itself, has captured imaginations for centuries. But was it real or just a myth born from the ingenuity of ancient storytelling? Let's shine a light on this enigmatic invention and uncover the truth behind one of history's most fascinating tales. The story of Archimedes' death ray is one of those tantalizing tales that sits somewhere between history and legend, a weapon so extraordinary it feels like it belongs in the realm of myth. According to ancient accounts, during the Roman siege of Syracuse in 212 BCE, the brilliant Greek mathematician and inventor Archimedes devised a device that harnessed the power of the sun itself. Using an array of mirrors, he allegedly focused sunlight onto Roman ships, setting them ablaze from a distance. It's a story that has captured imaginations for centuries, but how much of it is true? Let's dive into the science, the skepticism, and the enduring mystery of the death ray. To understand the death ray, we first need to look at the man behind the legend. Archimedes was a genius far ahead of his time, known for his groundbreaking work in mathematics, physics, and engineering. His inventions, like the Archimedes screw, still used today for lifting water, prove his ability to turn abstract ideas into practical tools. So, the idea that he could conceive of a weapon using mirrors isn't entirely far-fetched. But could such a device actually work? Modern scientists and engineers have tried to answer this question with mixed results. Experiments have shown that mirrors can, in theory, focus sunlight enough to ignite materials, but achieving the precision and intensity needed to set a ship on fire would be incredibly challenging. Factors like the distance, the angle of the mirrors, and the movement of the ships would all complicate the process. The historical accounts themselves are far from definitive. The earliest mention of the death ray comes from writings centuries after the siege, raising questions about their reliability. Some historians argue that the story may have been exaggerated or even invented to highlight Archimedes' brilliance. Others suggest that the mirrors might have been used more as a psychological weapon, dazzling and disorienting Roman sailors rather than burning their ships. The truth is, we may never know for certain whether the death ray was a real weapon or simply a clever embellishment. What we do know is that the story speaks to the awe-inspiring reputation of Archimedes, a man whose ingenuity seemed almost limitless. The debate over the death ray's feasibility isn't just about proving whether it worked. It's a reminder of how ancient inventors pushed the boundaries of what was possible. Archimedes' legacy is one of curiosity and innovation, qualities that continue to inspire scientists and engineers today. Whether the death ray was fact or fiction, It represents the spirit of experimentation and the drive to find new ways to solve old problems. And that, perhaps, is the real power of the story. As we leave the sunlit mystery of Archimedes' death ray behind, we turn our attention to a group often overlooked in the annals of ancient warfare: women. From queens leading armies to warrior women fighting alongside men, women played a far more significant role in ancient combat than many realize. Their stories challenge our assumptions and reveal a richer, more complex picture of the past. How did women shape the course of ancient warfare, and what can their experiences teach us about the societies they lived in? The answers lie in the tales of courage, strategy, and resilience that have too often been left untold. When we think of ancient warfare, the image that often comes to mind is one of men clad in armor, leading armies into battle. But history tells a different story, one where women not only stood alongside men but also led them, strategized for them, and sometimes even outshone them. From warrior queens to legendary fighters, women played pivotal roles in shaping the outcomes of ancient conflicts, challenging the notion that warfare was exclusively a male domain. Their stories, often overshadowed or forgotten, reveal a side of history that is as inspiring as it is surprising. Take Boudica, the fierce queen of the Iceni tribe in ancient Britain. When the Romans attempted to seize her lands and humiliate her family, she didn't retreat, she rallied. Leading a massive uprising, Boudica united several tribes and launched a campaign that nearly drove the Romans out of Britain. Her forces burned Roman settlements, including Londinium, modern-day London, and her name became synonymous with resistance and defiance. Boudica's story is a powerful reminder that leadership and courage know no gender. She wasn't just a warrior, she was a symbol of hope for her people, a leader who fought not just for territory but for justice and dignity. Then there's Artemisia, I of Caria, a naval commander whose brilliance on the water earned her the respect of even her enemies. As an ally of the Persian king Xerxes during the Greco-Persian Wars, Artemisia commanded her own fleet of ships and played a key role in the Battle of Salamis. What set her apart wasn't just her tactical skill, but her ability to navigate the male-dominated world of ancient warfare. Xerxes himself reportedly said, "My men have become women and my women men," a nod to Artemisia's unmatched prowess. Her story challenges the stereotype that ancient naval warfare was a man's world, proving that women could not only participate but excel in even the most demanding roles. And we can't forget the Amazons, the legendary tribe of warrior women who have fascinated historians and storytellers for centuries. Whether they were a myth or a real group, the Amazons represent the enduring idea of women as equals in combat. Ancient Greek art and literature often depicted them as fierce, independent fighters, skilled with bows and arrows and unafraid to defend their territory. The Amazons may be shrouded in myth, but their legacy speaks to a broader truth, that women have always been capable of wielding power and influence on the battlefield. Yet for every Boudica, Artemisia, or Amazon, there were countless women whose contributions went unrecorded. Many served as strategists, advisors, or even spies, using their intellect and resourcefulness to outmaneuver enemies. Others fought directly, wielding weapons and standing shoulder to shoulder with men in the chaos of battle. Their stories remind us that warfare wasn't just about physical strength, it was about strategy, resilience, and the ability to adapt. Women brought unique perspectives and skills to the battlefield, often turning the tide in unexpected ways. Cultural attitudes toward women in combat varied widely across ancient societies. Some, like the Scythians and Sarmatians, celebrated women warriors, burying them with weapons and armor to honor their martial prowess. Others, like the Greeks and Romans, often relegated women to the sidelines, viewing warfare as a masculine endeavor. But even in these societies, exceptions emerged, proving that societal norms could be challenged and rewritten. The stories of these women weren't just about breaking barriers, they were about redefining what it meant to be a warrior. The legacy of women in ancient warfare is a testament to their resilience and ingenuity. They fought not just for victory but for survival, for their families and for their communities. Their stories remind us that history is richer and more complex than the narratives we often hear. Warfare wasn't just a male domain, it was a human one, shaped by the courage and determination of individuals regardless of gender. As we turn from the land to the sea, we'll explore another fascinating aspect of ancient warfare, the rise of naval combat. From the sleek triremes of the Mediterranean to the innovative tactics that reshaped maritime battles, the ancient world's waters were as much a battlefield as its plains and mountains. How did these seafaring warriors dominate the waves, and what can their strategies teach us about the evolution of warfare? Let's set sail into the world of ancient naval warfare. The vast, open waters of the ancient world were not just highways for trade and exploration, they were battlegrounds where empires clashed for supremacy. Naval warfare, with its unique challenges and opportunities, became a cornerstone of military strategy, shaping the rise and fall of civilizations. From the sleek, agile triremes of the Mediterranean to the towering warships of the ancient world, the high seas were a stage for some of the most innovative and brutal tactics ever devised. But what made naval warfare so pivotal, and how did ancient sailors turn ships into instruments of conquest? Let's set sail into the world of ancient naval battles and uncover the secrets of their success. At the heart of ancient naval warfare was the trireme, a sleek, fast ship powered by 3 tiers of rowers. These vessels were marvels of engineering designed for speed and maneuverability. A single trireme could carry up to 200 men, including rowers, marines, and archers, all working in unison to outpace and outmaneuver their enemies. The key to their effectiveness lay in their ramming capability, a reinforced bronze prow that could pierce the hulls of enemy ships with devastating force. Picture the scene, a trireme racing across the waves, its rowers pulling in perfect rhythm, the prow aimed directly at its target. With a thunderous crash, the enemy ship would be torn apart, its crew thrown into the water or left scrambling to escape. Ramming wasn't just about destruction, it was about precision, timing, and the ability to strike before your opponent could react. But ramming wasn't the only tactic in the ancient sailors' playbook. Boarding actions were equally critical, turning naval battles into close-quarters combat. When ships closed in on each other, Marines armed with swords, spears, and shields would leap onto the enemy deck, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand fighting. These boarding actions were as much about physical strength as they were about coordination and discipline. Success often depended on the ability to overwhelm the enemy quickly, seizing control of their ship before reinforcements could arrive. For the ancient Greeks and Romans, these clashes were a test of both individual skill and collective teamwork, as sailors and soldiers fought side by side to secure victory. Naval battles also saw the use of more unconventional weapons. Fire, for instance, became a deadly tool on the water. Ships equipped with fire pots or incendiary missiles could set enemy vessels ablaze, creating chaos and panic. The sight of a burning ship, its sails consumed by flames and its crew leaping into the sea, was a powerful deterrent, often forcing entire fleets to retreat. The psychological impact of fire at sea was immense, as it turned the very element that sustained ships, water, into an ally for the attacker. Even the most experienced sailors feared the uncontrollable spread of fire, making it a weapon of both destruction and terror. The importance of naval power extended far beyond individual battles. For ancient empires like Athens, Carthage, and Rome, control of the seas meant control of trade routes, resources, and territories. A strong navy could protect coastal cities, launch invasions, and project power across vast distances. The Athenian Empire, for example, built its dominance on the strength of its fleet, using its triremes to establish a network of alliances and colonies across the Aegean. Similarly, Rome's victory over Carthage in the Punic Wars was due in large part to its ability to challenge Carthage's naval supremacy. These empires understood that mastery of the seas was not just a military advantage, it was a foundation for political and economic power. Yet, naval warfare was not without its challenges. The unpredictable nature of the seas, storms, currents, and shifting winds could turn a carefully planned battle into a chaotic struggle for survival. Ships required constant maintenance, and crews needed to be trained to work together under the most demanding conditions. Logistics, too, played a crucial role. Supplying a fleet with food, water, and weapons was a massive undertaking, requiring careful planning and coordination. For ancient commanders, the sea was as much an adversary as the enemy, demanding respect and adaptability at every turn. The legacy of ancient naval warfare is a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. From the precision of ramming tactics to the chaos of boarding actions, ancient sailors turned ships into extensions of their will, using the sea as both a battlefield and a tool. Their strategies and innovations laid the groundwork for centuries of maritime conflict, shaping the course of history in ways that still resonate today. As we leave the rolling waves behind, we'll turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of ancient warfare: the use of sound as a weapon. From war drums to eerie horns, sound became a powerful tool for both inspiration and intimidation on the battlefield. The battlefield wasn't just a clash of steel and flesh. It was a symphony of sound where the roar of war drums and the blare of horns could be as deadly as any blade. Ancient warriors understood that sound was more than just noise. It was a weapon capable of striking fear, sowing confusion, and breaking the will of their enemies. From the rhythmic pounding of war drums to the eerie wail of horns, sound became a tool of psychological warfare, turning the chaos of battle into a calculated assault on the senses. But how did these auditory tactics work, and why were they so effective? Let's step into the cacophony of ancient warfare and uncover the power of noise. War drums were among the most iconic sound weapons of the ancient world. These instruments, often massive and intricately designed, served a dual purpose. They coordinated troops and terrified enemies. Picture this: a line of soldiers, shields raised, marching in perfect unison to the beat of a drum. The rhythm wasn't just for show. It kept the army synchronized, ensuring that every step, every strike was executed with precision. But for the enemy, that same rhythm was a harbinger of doom. The deep, resonant thud of war drums echoed across the battlefield, growing louder and more menacing as the army advanced. It was a sound that signaled discipline, unity, and inevitability, a reminder that the approaching force was unstoppable. For those on the receiving end, the psychological toll was immense. The relentless beat could fray nerves, disrupt focus, and even plant seeds of doubt long before the first blow was struck. Horns, too, played a crucial role in ancient sound warfare. The Celts, for example, used the carnix, a long, trumpet-like instrument adorned with animal heads, to create haunting, otherworldly tones. The sound of the carnix was unlike anything most soldiers had ever heard, a deep, guttural wail that seemed to come from the earth itself. It wasn't just a call to arms, it was a weapon of terror designed to unnerve and disorient. Imagine standing in formation, shields locked, when suddenly the air is pierced by a sound so alien, so unsettling that it sends shivers down your spine. That was the power of the carnix. It turned the battlefield into a place of fear and uncertainty, where the line between reality and nightmare blurred. But sound wasn't just about instruments, it was also about the environment. Ancient commanders knew how to use the natural acoustics of the battlefield to their advantage. In narrow valleys or enclosed spaces, the echoes of war cries, drumbeats, and horn blasts could amplify, creating a disorienting cacophony that confused and frightened enemies. The sound would bounce off cliffs and walls, making it difficult to determine the direction or distance of the threat. This manipulation of sound wasn't just a tactic, it was an art, one that required a deep understanding of both the terrain and human psychology. By turning the landscape into an instrument, ancient warriors could control the narrative of the battle, shaping their enemies' perceptions and reactions. Sound also played a significant role in rituals and ceremonies, further cementing its power as a psychological tool. Before battle, armies would often engage in chants, songs, or rhythmic stomping, creating a sense of unity and purpose. These rituals weren't just for morale, they were a show of strength, a way to intimidate the enemy before the fighting even began. The Maori of New Zealand, for example, performed the haka, a fierce dance accompanied by rhythmic chanting, to demonstrate their readiness and strike fear into their foes. These performances were more than just tradition. They were a form of psychological warfare, a way to assert dominance and unnerve the opposition. The psychological impact of sound in warfare cannot be overstated. It played on the most primal of human instincts: fear of the unknown, fear of chaos, fear of the uncontrollable. A well-executed sound strategy could disrupt enemy formations, break morale, and even turn the tide of a battle. It was a reminder that warfare wasn't just about physical strength. It was about the mind, about creating an environment where fear and confusion reigned. For ancient warriors, sound was more than just a tool. It was a weapon, one that could strike without ever drawing blood. As we leave the echoing battlefields behind, we turn our attention to another mysterious and fearsome weapon of the ancient world, the scythed chariot. These deadly vehicles, equipped with blades that could slice through anything in their path, were as much a spectacle as they were a force of destruction. But what made them so effective, and why did they inspire both awe and terror? Let's explore the lethal legacy of the scythed chariot. The battlefield was no place for the faint of heart, but few weapons struck terror into the ranks of ancient armies like the scythed chariot. Imagine a chariot, sleek and swift but with a deadly twist, blades protruding from its wheels and sides, sharpened to slice through anything in their path. These were not merely vehicles for transport or display, they were instruments of destruction, designed to mow down infantry with brutal efficiency. The sight of a scythed chariot charging toward an enemy line was enough to send even the bravest soldiers scrambling for safety. But what made these chariots so fearsome, and why did they become both a symbol of power and a cautionary tale in ancient warfare? At their core, scythed chariots were a product of ingenuity and necessity. The concept was simple yet horrifyingly effective. Blades, often made of iron or bronze, were mounted horizontally on the axles of the chariot's wheels, extending outward like the spokes of a deadly wheel. Additional blades were sometimes attached to the sides or even the front of the chariot, ensuring that anything caught in its path, whether soldier, horse, or shield, would be cut down without mercy. The chariot itself was lightweight, built for speed and maneuverability, and typically pulled by 2 or more horses. This combination of speed and lethality made the scythed chariot a formidable weapon, especially against tightly packed infantry formations. The deployment of scythed chariots was as much about psychology as it was about physical destruction. Picture this, a line of these deadly machines thundering toward an enemy, their blades glinting in the sunlight. The sound of hooves pounding the ground, the sight of the blades spinning like a whirlwind of death. It was a spectacle designed to break morale before the first strike. Even the most disciplined soldiers would hesitate, their instinct for survival overriding their training. The chaos caused by a scythed chariot charge could disrupt entire formations, creating openings for follow-up attacks by cavalry or infantry. It was a weapon that didn't just kill, it shattered confidence and sowed panic. One of the most famous users of scythed chariots was the Persian Empire, particularly during their conflicts with the Greeks and Macedonians. The Persians, known for their innovative military tactics, saw the potential of these chariots to counter the heavily armored phalanxes of their enemies. In battles like Gaugamela, scythed chariots were deployed with devastating effect, their blades cutting through the ranks of Alexander the Great's forces. However, the success of these chariots was not guaranteed. Their effectiveness depended heavily on the terrain and the discipline of the opposing army. On flat, open ground, scythed chariots could unleash their full potential, but in rough or uneven terrain, their mobility was severely limited. Despite their fearsome reputation, scythed chariots were not without their flaws. For one, they required highly skilled drivers and horses trained to charge directly into enemy lines, a task that was as dangerous for the crew as it was for the enemy. If the chariot was slowed or stopped, the crew became easy targets for enemy soldiers. Additionally, the presence of scythed chariots often forced opposing armies to adapt their tactics. The Greeks, for example, learned to counter these chariots by opening gaps in their formations, allowing the chariots to pass through harmlessly before closing ranks and attacking the vulnerable crew. Over time, as armies became more adept at countering them, the scythed chariots' effectiveness diminished. The decline of scythed chariots was also tied to the evolution of warfare itself. As armies grew larger and more sophisticated, the focus shifted toward more versatile and reliable weapons. Cavalry, with its greater mobility and adaptability, began to overshadow the chariot as the dominant force on the battlefield. The logistical challenges of maintaining and deploying scythed chariots requiring specialized training, equipment, and terrain also contributed to their eventual obsolescence. By the time of the Roman Empire, scythed chariots had largely disappeared from the battlefield, relegated to the annals of history as a brutal but fleeting innovation. The legacy of the scythed chariot is a testament to the relentless creativity of ancient warfare. It was a weapon born of both brilliance and desperation, a reminder that in the quest for victory, no idea was too extreme. Yet, its rise and fall also teach us an important lesson about innovation. Even the most fearsome tools are only as effective as the strategies that employ them. As we move from the brutal efficiency of scythed chariots, we'll turn our attention to another powerful force on the ancient battlefield, one that wielded influence not through blades or arrows but through belief. Religion, with its ability to inspire, unite, and terrify, played a pivotal role in shaping the outcomes of ancient conflicts. How did faith influence the strategies, morale, and even the weapons of ancient warriors? The answers lie in the divine. The battlefield was not just a clash of armies, it was a stage where the divine and the mortal intersected, shaping the outcomes of wars in ways that went beyond mere strategy or strength. Ancient warriors didn't just rely on swords and shields, they turned to the gods for guidance, protection, and even intervention. Religion was woven into every aspect of warfare, from the grand strategies of generals to the daily lives of soldiers. How did faith influence the decisions made on the battlefield? And what role did the divine play in the minds of those who fought? Let's step into the sacred world of ancient warfare, where gods and goddesses were as much a part of the fight as the warriors themselves. Before any battle, ancient armies often turned to rituals and sacrifices to secure divine favor. These ceremonies weren't just symbolic gestures, they were seen as essential to victory. In ancient Greece, for example, generals would consult oracles like the famous Oracle of Delphi, seeking prophecies that could guide their strategies. The Romans, too, placed great importance on omens, interpreting the flight of birds or the entrails of sacrificed animals as signs from the gods. A favorable omen could boost morale and unite an army, while an unfavorable one might delay or even cancel a campaign. These rituals weren't just about appeasing the gods, they were about control, creating a sense of order and purpose in the chaotic uncertainty of war. The psychological impact of divine favor cannot be overstated. For soldiers marching into battle, the belief that the gods were on their side was a powerful source of courage and resolve. It transformed fear into determination, turning ordinary men into warriors willing to face overwhelming odds. Imagine standing in a phalanx, spear in hand, as your commander announces that the gods have promised victory. That assurance, whether real or imagined, could make the difference between standing firm and breaking ranks. Religion gave soldiers something greater than themselves to fight for, a cause that transcended the mortal realm and connected them to the divine. But divine intervention wasn't just about inspiration, it was also about strategy. Commanders often used religion to manipulate their enemies, spreading rumors of divine disfavor or staging omens to sow doubt. The Persians, for example, were known to exploit the religious beliefs of their adversaries, using their own rituals and symbols to undermine morale. In this way, religion became a tool of psychological warfare, a way to weaken the enemy's resolve without ever drawing a sword. It was a reminder that warfare wasn't just about physical strength, it was about the mind, the spirit, and the beliefs that drove men to fight. One of the most fascinating examples of religion's role in warfare comes from the story of the Trojan War. The Greeks, led by Agamemnon, believed that the gods had chosen their side, but they also understood that divine favor could be fickle. To appease the goddess Artemis, Agamemnon reluctantly sacrificed his daughter, Iphigenia, a decision that haunted him and shaped the course of the war. This tale illustrates the complex relationship between faith and warfare, where the lines between devotion and desperation often blurred. For ancient warriors, the gods were not distant figures, they were active participants, shaping the fates of armies and empires. Yet, the influence of religion wasn't limited to the battlefield. It extended to the home front, where communities relied on their gods to protect their soldiers and ensure their safe return. Temples and shrines became centers of hope and prayer, while festivals and processions celebrated victories and mourned losses. Religion provided a framework for understanding war, turning the chaos of conflict into a narrative of divine will and human struggle. It was a way to make sense of the unimaginable, to find meaning in the midst of destruction. The legacy of religion in ancient warfare is a testament to its power as both a motivator and a guide. It shaped strategies, inspired soldiers, and even influenced the outcomes of battles. But it also reminds us of the human need for connection, to something greater, to a purpose that transcends the here and now. For ancient warriors, the gods were not just symbols, they were partners in the struggle, shaping the course of history as much as any sword or shield. As we leave the sacred realm of divine intervention behind, we'll turn our attention to another shadowy aspect of ancient warfare, the art of espionage. How did spies and secret agents operate in a world without modern technology? The answers lie in the cunning and resourcefulness of those who fought in the shadows. In the shadows of ancient warfare, where armies clashed and empires rose and fell, there was another battlefield, one fought in silence and secrecy. Espionage, the art of gathering secrets, was a weapon as potent as any sword or shield. While the clash of armies dominated the headlines of history, it was often the work of spies that tipped the scales in favor of victory. Disguises, coded messages, and covert operations were the tools of this hidden trade, allowing ancient spies to infiltrate enemy ranks, sabotage plans, and gather critical intelligence. But how did these shadowy agents operate in a world without modern technology? And what impact did their work have on the outcomes of ancient battles? Let's step into the clandestine world of ancient espionage and uncover the secrets of those who fought in the dark. one of the most common tools in a spy's arsenal was the art of disguise. Ancient spies often blended into enemy territories by adopting local customs, languages, and even appearances. They might pose as merchants, travelers, or even deserters, slipping unnoticed into enemy camps or cities. In ancient Egypt, for example, spies were known to infiltrate rival kingdoms disguised as traders, gathering information about military movements and resource allocations. The ability to adapt and blend in was crucial, as a single misstep could mean exposure and death. These spies weren't just skilled actors, they were masters of observation, able to absorb and recall intricate details about their surroundings. Their work required not only courage but also a deep understanding of human nature and culture. Coded messages were another hallmark of ancient espionage. Without the luxury of secure communication channels, spies relied on ingenious methods to convey information without detection. The Greeks, for instance, used a device called the scythed, a rod around which a strip of parchment was wrapped. The message would be written along the length of the rod, and when unwound, the letters would appear scrambled to anyone without the corresponding rod to decode them. Similarly, the Spartans were known to shave a messenger's head, write a message on their scalp, and wait for their hair to grow back before sending them on their way. These methods might seem crude by modern standards, but they were remarkably effective in an era where literacy was limited and secrecy was paramount. Espionage wasn't just about gathering information, it was also about sabotage. Ancient spies were often tasked with undermining enemy morale or disrupting their operations. One famous example comes from the Trojan War, where the Greek spy Sinon played a pivotal role in the deception that led to the fall of Troy. Pretending to be a deserter, Sinon convinced the Trojans to bring the infamous wooden horse into their city, a ruse that allowed Greek forces to infiltrate and destroy Troy from within. This story, whether myth or history, illustrates the power of psychological manipulation and the lengths to which spies would go to achieve their objectives. The impact of espionage on ancient warfare cannot be overstated. In many cases, the intelligence gathered by spies determined the outcome of entire campaigns. During the Punic Wars, for example, Roman spies infiltrated Carthaginian territories, providing critical information about their enemies' plans and resources. This intelligence allowed Rome to outmaneuver Carthage, ultimately leading to its defeat. Similarly, in ancient China, the use of spies was a cornerstone of military strategy, as detailed in Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Sun Tzu famously wrote, "All warfare is based on deception," emphasizing the importance of espionage in gaining an edge over the enemy. Yet, for all its effectiveness, espionage was a dangerous and often thankless profession. Spies operated in constant peril, with the ever-present risk of capture and execution. Their work was shrouded in secrecy, and their contributions were rarely acknowledged in the annals of history. Despite this, the role of spies was indispensable, a reminder that victory on the battlefield often depended on the unseen efforts of those who worked in the shadows. As we leave the covert world of ancient espionage behind, we turn our attention to another critical factor in ancient warfare, the use of terrain. From mountain passes to river crossings, the landscape itself became a weapon in the hands of skilled commanders. How did ancient armies exploit the natural world to outmaneuver their enemies, and what lessons can we learn from their strategies? The answers lie in the hills, valleys, and rivers that shaped the course of history. The battlefield wasn't just about armies clashing, it was about the ground they stood on. Ancient commanders understood that the land itself could be a weapon, shaping the flow of battle in ways that arrows and swords never could. From the dense forests of Germania to the rocky cliffs of Thermopylae, terrain dictated strategy, turning battles into games of wits as much as strength. The ability to read the landscape, to use its natural features to outmaneuver an enemy, was a skill that separated great generals from the rest. But how did ancient armies turn mountains, rivers, and forests into tools of war? Let's explore the art of terrain tactics, where the land itself became a silent ally in the fight for victory. One of the most effective ways to use terrain to your advantage was the ambush. By hiding in the folds of the landscape behind hills, within dense woods, or along narrow mountain passes, an army could catch its enemy completely off guard. Picture this: a Roman legion marching through a narrow valley, confident in its numbers and discipline, when suddenly arrows rain down from the cliffs above. The attackers, hidden in the rocks, have the high ground, making it nearly impossible for the Romans to fight back effectively. This was the power of the ambush, a tactic that turned the natural world into a deadly trap. The Gauls, known for their guerrilla tactics, used this strategy to great effect against Roman forces, leveraging their knowledge of the local terrain to strike and disappear before the enemy could respond. Fortifications were another way to harness the power of the land. Ancient armies didn't just build walls and towers, they integrated them into the natural landscape, creating defenses that were as much a part of the terrain as the hills they stood on. Take, for example, the Great Wall of China. Stretching across thousands of miles, it wasn't just a barrier, it was a strategic masterpiece, built along mountain ridges and cliffs to maximize its defensive potential. By using the natural elevation, the wall made it nearly impossible for invaders to breach, forcing them into narrow, easily defended passes. Fortifications like these weren't just about keeping enemies out, they were about controlling the flow of battle, turning the land into a fortress. Rivers and mountains were particularly valuable in ancient warfare, offering both protection and opportunity. Rivers could serve as natural barriers, slowing down enemy advances and providing a line of defense. But they could also be used offensively. During the Battle of the Nile, for instance, the Egyptian fleet used the river's currents to their advantage, outmaneuvering the Persian ships and securing a decisive victory. Mountains, on the other hand, offered high ground and visibility, allowing commanders to oversee the battlefield and plan their moves with precision. The famous Battle of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force held off the Persian army, was a masterclass in using narrow mountain passes to neutralize the enemy's numerical advantage. By funneling the Persians into a tight space, the Greeks turned the terrain into a force multiplier, allowing a few to hold off the many. Understanding the land wasn't just about exploiting its physical features, it was about anticipating how the enemy would move through it. Ancient generals spent as much time studying maps and scouting the terrain as they did training their troops. They knew that a river could flood, a forest could hide an ambush, or a mountain pass could become a death trap. This knowledge allowed them to plan their movements with precision, using the land to dictate where and how the battle would unfold. For example, Hannibal's legendary crossing of the Alps wasn't just a daring feat of endurance, it was a calculated move to use the mountains as a shield, catching the Romans off guard and forcing them to fight on his terms. The importance of terrain in ancient warfare cannot be overstated. It was a tool, a weapon, and a teacher, shaping the strategies of armies and the fates of empires. From the ambushes in the forests to the fortifications on the cliffs, the land itself played a starring role in the drama of war. It reminds us that victory wasn't just about strength or numbers, it was about understanding the world around you and using it to your advantage. And as we leave the rolling hills and winding rivers behind, we turn our attention to another marvel of ancient ingenuity, the mysterious Chinese repeating crossbow. This weapon, with its rapid fire capability, was a game changer on the battlefield, showcasing yet another way that ancient civilizations pushed the boundaries of warfare. Imagine standing on a battlefield, your enemy advancing, and in your hands you hold a weapon that can unleash a storm of arrows faster than they can blink. This wasn't just a fantasy, it was the reality for ancient Chinese warriors armed with the repeating crossbow. Known as the Chu Ko Nu, this ingenious weapon was a game-changer, a marvel of engineering that brought rapid-fire capability to the battlefield centuries before modern firearms. But what made this crossbow so revolutionary, and how did it shape the course of Chinese military history? Let's dive into the world of ancient rapid fire and uncover the secrets of this extraordinary weapon. At its core, the repeating crossbow was a masterpiece of simplicity and efficiency. Unlike traditional crossbows, which required time-consuming reloading after each shot, the Chu Ko Nu featured a magazine that could hold multiple bolts. By pulling a lever, the user could fire a bolt, reload, and fire again in quick succession, achieving a rate of fire that was unmatched for its time. The design was elegant, a wooden stock, a horizontal magazine mounted on top, and a lever mechanism that allowed for smooth, continuous firing. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a testament to the ingenuity of ancient Chinese engineers who understood that speed and precision could be as deadly as raw power. The Chu Ko Nu wasn't just fast, it was also versatile. Its bolts, though smaller and lighter than those of a traditional crossbow, were still lethal at close to medium range. The weapon's rapid-fire capability made it particularly effective in defensive situations, such as repelling enemy charges or holding fortified positions. Picture this, a line of repeating crossbowmen standing atop a city wall, raining down a relentless barrage of bolts on an advancing army. The psychological impact alone was enough to break morale, as enemies realized they were facing a weapon that could outpace their own. It was a tool of both destruction and intimidation, a weapon that didn't just kill, it overwhelmed, but the repeating crossbow wasn't without its challenges. Its lightweight bolts lacked the penetrating power of traditional crossbow arrows, making it less effective against heavily armored opponents. The weapon's range was also limited, requiring users to get uncomfortably close to their targets. And while the Chu Ko Nu was easy to operate, maintaining its delicate mechanism in the heat of battle could be a challenge. Rain, dirt, or even rough handling could jam the magazine, leaving the user defenseless at a critical moment. These limitations meant that the repeating crossbow was often used in conjunction with other weapons, rather than as a standalone solution. Despite these drawbacks, the Chu Ko Nu played a significant role in Chinese military history. It became a staple of both imperial armies and local militias, particularly during times of civil unrest or invasion. Its affordability and ease of use made it accessible to a wide range of soldiers, from seasoned warriors to conscripted peasants. In the hands of a skilled user, the repeating crossbow could turn the tide of a battle, delivering a rapid and devastating response to enemy advances. It was a weapon that democratized warfare, giving even the most inexperienced fighters a chance to defend themselves effectively. The legacy of the repeating crossbow extends beyond its military applications. It stands as a symbol of ancient innovation, a reminder that even in a world dominated by swords and spears, there was room for creativity and technological advancement. The Chu Ko Nu wasn't just a weapon, it was a reflection of the Chinese approach to warfare, where strategy, adaptability, and resourcefulness were as important as strength and numbers. Its influence can still be seen today, not just in the weapons of modern warfare, but in the way we think about solving problems and overcoming challenges. As we leave the world of rapid-fire crossbows behind, we turn our attention to another fascinating aspect of ancient warfare, the art of camouflage. From blending into the natural landscape to using deceptive tactics to confuse enemies, camouflage was a tool that turned the environment into a weapon. How did ancient warriors use concealment to gain the upper hand? And what can their strategies teach us about the importance of adaptability in warfare? Let's step into the shadows and uncover the secrets of ancient camouflage. The battlefield wasn't always about standing out. Sometimes the key to victory lay in disappearing. Ancient warriors understood the power of blending in, using camouflage to turn the environment into an ally. Whether it was hiding in plain sight or blending seamlessly into the natural world, camouflage was a subtle yet highly effective tactic that could mean the difference between life and death. But how did ancient armies achieve this? From natural foliage to painted shields, the methods were as varied as the landscapes they fought in. Let's step into the art of concealment and uncover how ancient warriors mastered the craft of disappearing in plain sight. One of the most straightforward yet effective forms of camouflage involved using the environment itself. Soldiers would drape themselves in leaves, branches, or even animal hides, mimicking the colors and textures of their surroundings. Picture a scout moving silently through a dense forest, his body covered in greenery, his footsteps muffled by the soft earth. To an unsuspecting enemy, he was invisible, just another part of the landscape. This method wasn't just about hiding, it was about becoming one with the terrain, using it to move undetected and strike without warning. The Gauls, for example, were known for their ability to blend into the forests of Europe, using their knowledge of the land to launch surprise attacks on Roman forces. It was a tactic that relied on both creativity and patience, as soldiers had to remain perfectly still for long periods, waiting for the right moment to act. But camouflage wasn't limited to natural materials. Ancient warriors also turned to artistry, painting their bodies, shields, and even their weapons to match their surroundings. The Picts of ancient Scotland, for instance, were famous for their use of body paint, earning them their name derived from the Latin word picti, meaning painted people. These intricate designs weren't just for show, they served a practical purpose, breaking up the human silhouette and making it harder for enemies to spot them at a distance. Shields, too, were often painted with patterns that mimicked natural elements like wood grain or foliage, allowing soldiers to blend into the background during ambushes or defensive maneuvers. The psychological impact of camouflage cannot be overstated. Imagine advancing across a field, only to realize too late that what you thought were bushes or rocks are actually enemy soldiers lying in wait. The sudden realization that you've walked into a trap can be paralyzing, shattering morale and disrupting even the most disciplined formations. Camouflage wasn't just about hiding, it was about creating uncertainty, forcing enemies to question every shadow and every movement. In this way, it became a weapon of the mind as much as the body, sowing fear and confusion long before the first blow was struck. Yet, maintaining effective camouflage wasn't without its challenges. Natural materials like leaves and branches could dry out or shift, revealing the soldier beneath. Painted patterns, while effective at a distance, could wear off over time or become less effective in changing light conditions. And then there was the difficulty of movement. Remaining concealed while advancing or retreating required immense skill and discipline. A single misstep, a rustling branch, or a glint of sunlight off a shield could betray a soldier's position, turning the hunter into the hunted. These challenges forced ancient warriors to constantly adapt, refining their techniques and learning to read the environment with precision. Camouflage also played a role in larger strategic maneuvers. Armies would often use it to conceal their movements, hiding entire units in plain sight to set up ambushes or flanking maneuvers. The Romans, for example, were known to use camouflaged scouts to gather intelligence on enemy positions, their ability to blend in giving them a crucial edge in planning their attacks. Similarly, during sieges, defenders might use camouflage to disguise fortifications or hide their numbers, making it harder for attackers to gauge their strength. In these ways, camouflage became a tool of both offense and defense, shaping the flow of battle in ways that were often invisible but no less impactful. The legacy of ancient camouflage is a testament to the ingenuity and resourcefulness of early warriors. It reminds us that warfare wasn't just about strength or numbers. It was about creativity, adaptability, and the ability to turn the world around you into a weapon. From the painted shields of the Picts to the leafy disguises of the Gauls, these tactics laid the groundwork for modern military strategies, proving that sometimes the best way to win is to disappear. As we leave the hidden world of camouflage, we turn our attention to a darker and more mysterious aspect of ancient warfare: chemical weapons. These deadly tools, often cloaked in secrecy, introduced a new level of terror to the battlefield. How did ancient armies use toxins and noxious substances to gain the upper hand? And what can their methods teach us about the evolution of warfare? The answers lie in the shadows of ancient ingenuity, where science and strategy collided in ways that still leave us in awe today. The battlefield was not just a clash of steel and strategy. It was also a place where ancient warriors turned to the dark arts of chemistry to gain an edge. Long before the horrors of modern chemical warfare, civilizations were already experimenting with toxic substances, using them to sow chaos, fear, and destruction. From poisonous gases to noxious smoke, these early forms of chemical warfare were as deadly as they were innovative. But what drove ancient armies to embrace such brutal tactics, and how did they harness the power of toxins? Let's step into the shadowy world of ancient chemical warfare, where science and cruelty collided in ways that still leave us stunned. One of the earliest examples of chemical warfare comes from the ancient Persians, who used toxic smoke to devastating effect during sieges. In the 4th century BCE, during their conflict with the Romans at Dura Europos, the Persians dug tunnels beneath the city walls and ignited a mixture of sulfur and bitumen. The resulting fumes, thick and choking, filled the tunnels and suffocated the Roman defenders who had tried to counter the assault underground. This wasn't just a weapon of destruction, it was a psychological tool designed to instill terror in those who witnessed its effects. The Persians understood that fear could be as powerful as any blade, and they wielded it with ruthless precision. The Greeks, too, were no strangers to chemical warfare. In their legendary conflicts with the Spartans, they employed a substance known as Greek fire, a precursor to the more famous Byzantine weapon of the same name. This early version was a mixture of flammable materials, including pitch and sulfur, which could be hurled at enemy ships or fortifications. When ignited, it created a thick, toxic smoke that not only burned but also poisoned the air, making it nearly impossible for soldiers to breathe. The Greeks often used this weapon in naval battles, where the confined spaces of ships amplified its effects, turning decks into infernos and crews into desperate, choking victims. But it wasn't just about smoke and fire. Ancient warriors also turned to natural toxins, using the environment itself as a weapon. In one particularly grim example, the Scythians, a nomadic people known for their ferocity, would coat their arrowheads in a potent mixture of snake venom and decaying animal remains. A single scratch from one of these arrows could lead to a slow, agonizing death as the toxins spread through the victim's body. The psychological impact was profound. Imagine facing an enemy whose weapons didn't just wound, they inflicted a lingering, torturous demise. It was a tactic designed not just to kill, but to break the spirit of those who survived. The use of chemical agents wasn't limited to the battlefield. Ancient armies also employed toxic substances to contaminate water supplies, a strategy that could cripple entire cities without a single direct confrontation. During sieges, attackers would sometimes poison wells or rivers, forcing defenders to choose between dehydration and a slow, painful death. This method was devastatingly effective, as it targeted not just soldiers but civilians, spreading fear and desperation throughout the population. It was a grim reminder that in the chaos of war, the line between combatant and bystander often blurred. Yet, the use of chemical warfare wasn't without its ethical dilemmas. Even in ancient times, some cultures viewed the use of toxins as dishonorable, a violation of the unwritten rules of combat. The Greeks and Romans, for example, often condemned such tactics, associating them with cowardice and treachery. But for those who embraced them, the ends justified the means. In a world where survival often depended on ruthless innovation, chemical weapons became a tool of necessity, a way to level the playing field against stronger or more numerous foes. The long-term effects of these early chemical weapons were as profound as they were horrifying. Beyond the immediate devastation, they left a legacy of fear and mistrust, shaping the way future generations approached warfare. The use of toxins and gases set a precedent, proving that even the most unconventional methods could be effective in the right hands. It was a dark chapter in military history, one that reminds us of the lengths to which humanity will go in the pursuit of victory. As we leave the toxic clouds of ancient chemical warfare behind, we turn our attention to another pivotal force in ancient armies, mercenaries. These hired soldiers, often from distant lands, played a crucial role in shaping the outcomes of battles and the rise of empires. How did mercenaries influence the strategies and cultures of the armies they served, and what drove them to fight for causes not their own? The answers lie in the stories of these wanderers of war, whose loyalty was as fluid as the tide. The battlefield was not just a place for loyalty and patriotism, it was also a marketplace where skill and strength were traded like currency. Among the ranks of ancient armies, mercenaries stood apart, soldiers who fought not for king or country, but for gold, glory, or survival. These hired warriors, often hailing from distant lands, brought their unique expertise and fierce independence to the battlefield, reshaping the dynamics of ancient warfare. But what drove these men to fight for causes not their own, and how did their presence influence the outcomes of battles? Let's step into the world of mercenaries, where loyalty was negotiable and survival was the ultimate prize. Mercenaries were a common sight in the armies of the ancient world, offering their services to the highest bidder. From the Greeks and Romans to the Persians and Carthaginians, nearly every major power relied on these hired soldiers at some point. Their motivations were as varied as their origins. Some were driven by the promise of wealth, lured by the chance to earn more in a single campaign than they could in a lifetime of farming or trading. Others sought adventure, drawn to the thrill of combat and the camaraderie of life on the march. And then there were those who had no choice, exiles, outcasts, or men fleeing poverty, for whom mercenary work was the only path to survival. Whatever their reasons, these soldiers brought a level of professionalism and experience that often surpassed that of conscripted troops. They were warriors by trade, honing their skills through countless battles and earning their keep through sheer effectiveness. The impact of mercenaries on ancient warfare was profound. They often filled critical roles in armies, serving as elite units, scouts, or specialized fighters. The Carthaginians, for example, famously relied on mercenaries to bolster their forces, recruiting skilled fighters from North Africa, Spain, and even the Celtic tribes of Europe. These soldiers brought diverse tactics and weapons to the battlefield, making Carthage's armies unpredictable and adaptable. Similarly, the Greeks employed Thracian peltasts, light infantry known for their agility and speed, to harass enemy formations and exploit weaknesses. By integrating mercenaries into their ranks, ancient commanders could address gaps in their own forces, turning hired soldiers into strategic assets. But relying on mercenaries was not without risks. Their loyalty was often fleeting, tied more to payment than patriotism. If wages were delayed or promises broken, mercenaries could turn on their employers, deserting or even joining the enemy. The Mercenary War, fought between Carthage and its own unpaid mercenaries in the 3rd century BCE, is a stark reminder of this danger. After the First Punic War, Carthage struggled to pay its mercenaries, leading to a brutal rebellion that nearly brought the empire to its knees. This conflict highlighted the precarious nature of relying on soldiers whose allegiance was tied to profit rather than principle. Moreover, the presence of mercenaries could create tension within armies. Professional soldiers often viewed these hired fighters with suspicion, seeing them as outsiders who lacked the same sense of duty or honor. This divide could undermine morale and cohesion, making it harder for commanders to maintain discipline. Yet, despite these challenges, mercenaries remained a vital part of ancient warfare. Their skills and experience were often too valuable to ignore, and in many cases they proved the difference between victory and defeat. The legacy of mercenaries in ancient warfare is a complex one. They were both a solution and a problem, a source of strength and a potential weakness. Their stories remind us that warfare has always been as much about pragmatism as it has been about ideals. For ancient commanders, mercenaries were a tool, a way to adapt and survive in a world where the stakes were life and death. And for the mercenaries themselves, the battlefield was a stage where they could carve out a place for themselves, whether through skill, cunning, or sheer determination. As we reflect on the role of mercenaries in ancient warfare, it's clear that their influence extended far beyond the battlefield. They were a reflection of the times, a world where borders were fluid, alliances were temporary, and survival often depended on adaptability. Their stories challenge our notions of loyalty and honor, reminding us that in the chaos of war, the lines between heroism and survival are often blurred. And now, as we bring all these elements together in our conclusion, we'll explore how these unconventional tactics and mysterious weapons shaped the course of history, leaving a legacy that continues to captivate us today. From the searing flames of Greek fire to the earth-shaking charge of war elephants, the unconventional tactics and mysterious weapons of ancient warfare paint a vivid picture of human ingenuity at its most creative and its most ruthless. These ancient innovations weren't just tools of destruction, they were testaments to the boundless imagination and resourcefulness of civilizations that refused to be constrained by the limits of their time. Whether it was the psychological terror of scythed chariots slicing through enemy ranks, the deadly precision of Chinese repeating crossbows, or the cunning use of poisoned arrows and subterfuge, these strategies and weapons reshaped the battlefield in ways that still leave us in awe today. What makes these ancient tactics so fascinating isn't just their effectiveness, but the stories they tell about the people who wielded them. Behind every flaming arrow, every hidden tunnel, and every war cry was a mind sharpened by necessity, a culture shaped by survival, and a society willing to push the boundaries of what was possible. These warriors weren't just fighting for territory or power, they were fighting for their very existence, and in doing so, they left behind a legacy that continues to shape our understanding of history. As we reflect on these ancient strategies, we're reminded that warfare has always been more than just a clash of brute force. It's a reflection of human creativity, a canvas where science, art, and strategy intersect. The ingenuity of the ancients challenges us to think differently about the challenges we face today, showing us that even in the most dire circumstances, innovation can emerge from the most unexpected places. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the unconventional and often mysterious world of ancient warfare. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden stories of history, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more deep dives into the past, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What ancient tactic or weapon fascinated you the most? Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep discovering the incredible stories that history has to offer. The past is full of mysteries. Let's uncover